Shankara Parvati Pati Mahadev Sri Shankara.
Namaste, it's Sahara Rose, and welcome back to the Highest Self podcast, a place where we discuss what makes you your soul's highest development. This episode is brought to you by Ayurveda. Ayurveda is a modernized Ayurvedic supplement company that takes certain issues that we have, such as mood, joints, immunity, digestion, and creates these custom little packets exactly for us, infusing ancient Ayurvedic herbs with modern vitamins and minerals. I take the mood formula daily. It is great if you work a stressful job, had adrenal fatigue, ever suffer from anxiety or even depression. And it really heals you from a fundamental and holistic level. So if you want to try it out, head over to Youveda, YOUVEDA.com. Use the code Sahara and you'll receive 35% off your first order. And they now ship to almost every country globally. So check it out if you live internationally. They may be shipping to your country too. And they just added India, guys. This episode is also brought to you by Four Sigmatic. Four Sigmatic is an incredible mushroom elixir company. I proudly drink their elixirs every single day. My favorite is their chai mix. It is insanely delicious. I quit chocolate cold turkey, and what helped me was drinking this chai mix every day. And best of all, they use stevia to sweeten it, and there's no sugars like the chai lattes you'll find at Starbucks or wherever else. And the mushrooms are really good for balancing your hormones, helping heal adrenal fatigue, healing your body on an adaptogenic level. So adaptogens really kind of relate to what your body needs. So if you are high stress, it will bring you down. If you need more energy, it will bring you up. And that's what's so amazing about adaptogens. They adapt to your body, and mushrooms, medicinal mushrooms, have a lot of adaptogenic properties. So you can head over to their website, foursigmatic.com, FOURSIGMATIC.com/Sahara. I have a little shop up there with my favorite Four Sigmatic products. So you can try it out, and you can also get 15% off any Four Sigmatic product using the code Sahara. Also, I'd like to make my book tour announcement. I will be coming to several different cities, not just to share my book, but to have a Bollywood dance party and hug each other and talk all about the doshas and relationships and business and self-care and everything in between. My book launch events are so much more than me just talking about the book, but it's really a way to create community and to have a lot of fun. So come join me October 12th in LA, October 17th in New York, November 30th in Miami, and I'm going to be going to San Diego sometime in between then. Head over to my website, eatfeelfresh.com/book. I'm going to be adding some more cities, so head over there so you can stay tuned, and I'm so excited to meet you in person. It's almost time. We are a week away from my book launch, and I am so excited to birth Eat Feel Fresh, a plant-based Ayurvedic cookbook, to the world and share it with you. And I purposely brought this episode with Dr. John Douillard at this time because he really educates us on Ayurvedic nutrition. As you may know, Ayurveda is the world's oldest health system that originates from ancient India over 5,000 years ago, and its premise really is healing the digestion. In Ayurveda, it's not you are what you eat, but rather you are what you digest. And instead of saying kale is good for everyone, strawberries are good for everyone, etc., Ayurveda looks at the individual, and they look at something called the doshas, which are unique energy types. So we're able to see from our energy types, our unique array of the doshas, what the best foods are for you. So if you've never heard of Ayurveda before, I highly recommend reading my first book, Idiot's Guide to Ayurveda. It really breaks down the system and makes it applicable, modern, and engageable. And checking out my new book, Eat Feel Fresh, which dives deep into the cooking and the how-to and how to make Ayurveda work for today's time. How do we meal prep? How do we make food for people of different doshas? What does this really look like in a 2018 world? And that's what I really wanted to share with you in Eat Feel Fresh. And in this episode, we speak all about Ayurvedic nutrition. Dr. John Douillard is an incredible array of knowledge on this topic, and we speak all about the Agni, the digestive system, very specific facts on Ayurveda that that most of us have never even heard of. So it was incredible to have him on this podcast episode and sharing with us. So don't forget to subscribe so you can continue to get episodes like this, and be sure to pre-order Eat Feel Fresh so you will be able to receive my pre-order bonuses, which include a signed book plate in the mail from me, an inspirational card also in the mail, as well as 10 bonus recipes that are not available in the book. And in this episode, you'll be able to learn more about Ayurvedic nutrition and why this approach to eating really is what we need in today's world. We're sick and tired of the one-size-fits-all approach. We need something that is catered and customized to us. So we speak about this in the episode. We really dive deep. Dr. Douillard shares with us so many great tidbits that we can apply into our world and into our diet and nutrition today. He even shares his own unique approach that he is an advocate of eating wheat, which is very unique. That's something I don't personally eat, but he has a book called Eat Wheat. So again, I share with you different perspectives on this podcast. Not everyone on this podcast is 100% everything is same as mine in a total alignment, but I want to share with you different approaches to eating so you can find what works best for you. Maybe eating wheat does work for you, or maybe eating wheat gives you really bad digestive issues. Again, this is what Ayurveda is about, learning what works for your unique body. Without further ado, let's welcome Dr. John Douillard to the Highest Self podcast. Namaste, and thank you so much for being here on the Highest Self podcast. It is such a privilege to have you here.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Yes, and you have been such an inspiration in my personal Ayurvedic journey. You've really shared with me how you can bridge together Ayurveda and sports nutrition. And so many times when I had questions, I would go on LiveSpa, I would watch your videos on YouTube. So thank you so much for being a pioneer truly in this movement.
You're very welcome. I love it. Thank you.
Yes. So the first question that I want to ask you, that I ask everyone, is what makes you your highest self?
You know, there's a study that showed that when people give, they can give one of two ways. They can give what's called hedonistically, where I give you this gift, but I sort of hope you like it. I'm sort of attached to the fact that you're enjoying the gift. And the other one is called eudaimonic giving, where I give you this gift, but I don't really care if you like it. I have fallen in love with giving it to you. And they studied the impact of that on the genetic code. And they found that when someone gives hedonistically, with a little bit of hope that they like the gift, it has no effect at the level of the genetic code. But when you actually give eudaimonically, it changes the genetic code. It epigenetically changes who we are. In other words, when someone gives to you fully, when they're not trying to get something in return, or even just some feeling of, I gave you a nice gift, the result is that it changes them. They can tell if it's real or not. So what I constantly strive to do is a Vedic concept, which is in chapter, I think, 44 of the Bhagavad Gita. It says, establish being, perform action. And when you establish being, you establish silence. And then you must act from that silence. Something that we don't talk a lot about in Ayurveda is how to take the action. We talk about how to be still, how to be calm, how to meditate, do yoga, breathe, calm your body down, become more aware. But what you do with that awareness is key. And I feel like that's the fundamental missing piece of Ayurvedic medicine. Is something that I feel like I strive for every single day, is to try to shoot the bow from that place of perfect silence or stillness. It's an aspect of the Veda, non-Ayurveda, where it's a transformational Vedic science where we change old patterns of behavior, kind of hedonistically needing to get the reward chemistry. I gave you this gift. Do you like it? Versus I'm giving this gift because I love you so much. I'm getting so blissed out giving you this gift. That is who we are. And that is what Ayurveda is about. So what really makes me my highest self is when I find myself locked into giving eudaimonically, giving in a way where, like, the sun doesn't care if you kill his cattle or chop down the trees. It just gives. It can't stop. And that's truly who we are. But this crazy mind of us totally stops us from being that and doing that. And that is when I find myself, my highest self, is when I'm giving from that level with no expectation, no attachment to the fruits of the action or the return on investment.
So beautiful and so well put. And I love how you talk about the action, because I think it's something that a lot of people are missing right now. They're so focused on becoming still, and that is a predecessor, but then they don't take that leap. So thank you so much for bringing that up for people.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I think it's the founding principle of Ayurveda. It's the founding principle of Veda. Veda is truth, right? And Ayurveda is life. So Ayurveda is the truth of your life. All the herbs and lifestyle and diet and nutrition, all that is to get us to be in balance, so we then can become more self-aware. And then what we do with that self-awareness, how we take action into the world to break old protective patterns of behavior we created as young kids to make us feel safe and secure, that we're still, in many cases, projecting on the screen as adults in our lives, doing the same dumb thing again and again and again, trying to get a different response. We keep doing that, not realizing that with heightened awareness, which is what Ayurveda is all about, yoga the same, we can then, which we don't do enough of, is actively take transformational action steps so you can be free from those old patterns of behavior that, oftentimes in adult life don't serve us any longer. They were great when you were a kid. You needed the approval and mom and dad to watch over you. But as an adult, we really need to break free of that need for love and start to be the love.
So true. And do you often see, patients coming into Life Spa who have these physical issues, but they're stemmed from these deeper emotional issues?
Well, I administered Panchakarma both when I came back from India in 1986. I joined up with Deepak and co-directed his center for 8 years. We did Panchakarma. I came to Boulder here and did Panchakarma for whenever that was, 1994 till just a couple of years ago. And I administered Panchakarma all those years, 26 years worth of Panchakarma. And there was no question that the purpose of Ayurveda, the purpose of Panchakarma, was to get the body to be still enough to get rid of enough toxins so they can create that super heightened state of awareness, and then be able to access the patterns of behavior that aren't serving them any longer, and then have the awareness to pull back the bow into such a deep place of silence that you could actually release that arrow into action steps into the world and transform old patterns of behavior that simply don't serve you any longer. That's what Panchakarma was about. So when people would come here for a week or two to do a rejuvenation therapy, a Panchakarma with us, and I would sit with them for hours while they're here doing deep Ayurvedic psychology, understanding what really makes them tick. And in this environment of potential transformation where they're releasing toxins out of their fat cells, dropping into this deep stillness, doing deep self-inquiry exercises, cleaning out their brain, sagittal sinus of all these toxic emotions that the deep Nasya therapies do, and creating a space where they are ready to make change. And then I would hold their hand and guide them through that transformational process. To me, that is what Ayurveda is about. Nobody gets that. It's sort of weird to me. Like in India, there's sort of the express your emotions or expose your emotions or be vulnerable or admit that you were wrong isn't really a thing. There's sort of a safe face environment there. I don't know where it came from. Maybe because India was bombarded and overthrown so many times, people were protective. I get that. But that's not, when you read the Veda, it says establish being and perform action based on truth, action based on not being attached to the fruits of the action. I mean, the whole Bhagavad Gita is about fruit, right? It's all about not being attached to the return on the investment. So that's really what I found Ayurveda to be fundamentally, is how can we get to that place where we can free ourselves from old patterns of behavior and step up to the plate to be vulnerable, step up to the plate to be powerful, step up to the plate to love and give fully without needing something in return. I love you, but it's no concern of yours is one of my favorite sayings, where I'm not doing this because I need you to love me. I love you in such a way that you feel safe in my sunlight, that the delicate petals of your flower will feel safe to open. And then you have access to the true, more authentic version of yourself. And that's a communion. And that's what Ayurveda was designed to do. It's Veda. It's about truth. And when we are young, we need mom and dad to love us. We create a mindset, a personality to be safe and secure. That's what we do. And then we project that on the screen. We want bicycles to make us feel happy, and cake and ice cream, and then money and power and fame and girlfriends and boyfriends. And we get all these things in our world. This world particularly is so full of stimulation that we get super addicted to this Rajasic potentially even tamasic world we live in, and we lose the sattva being that eye of the hurricane, that holding that arrow of the bow so still. I love that analogy of Dhanurveda, the Dhanurasana of the bow, because when you hold the arrow back here and you hold it really, really still, and then you shoot, it's going to be a transformational action with deep awareness. But if you move it just a little bit here, it's going to have an exponentially distorted flight and completely miss the target and not be transformational in any way. So it's established being, be perfectly still, be super aware, and then release the arrow and take action, transformational action in your life. That is what Ayurveda was truly about. Now, you need a healthy body to do that. You need, your doshas have to be in balance, and you have to have really good digestion and assimilation, and your lymphatic system, which is congested in most people, has to be flowing so you can detoxify. So all of the things that we love about Ayurveda are roads to hoe this much bigger piece of the pie, which is transformation.
That's so beautiful and so well put. And I'm sure everyone listening right now is just taking notes. And I think that metaphor of the stillness, and if you shake the arrow a little bit, it will go deeply in the wrong direction. And just how important it is to get to that sense of stillness so you can really shoot straight ahead.
Yeah. And that's why actually not that the world needs another meditation course, and it doesn't, but I have yet to see a meditation program that actually teach people how to meditate and then take action based on what they experience. So I wrote a meditation course, which is 6 meditations to emotional freedom. Each meditation easier, a little harder, a little deeper, a little deeper, a little deeper, but each one has transformational action steps tied to it. So we train the body to pull back the bow and shoot, pull back the bow and shoot. It's being established in the eye of the hurricane. So you are in the center of all the drama and all the stress. And the bigger the calm you have, the more powerful your winds are, the more productive you are in your life. But most of us try to figure out how to dodge refrigerators in the moving winds of the storm, and how to get into the middle of stress and then do a stress reduction technique after we've incurred it all day long. That's has nothing to do with what Ayurveda intended. It had the intention for us to establish the being and hail from that place of peace and calm. And from there, we are more productive, and we are established in the process of loving what we're doing. When you're there, you're doing your true nature. We're going off on this whole thing, but it's sort of beautiful. When I first would tell people that your nature is to be loving and giving and kind, and I've had people in my seminary say, well, how do you know that? And I go, well, because we are. And I had nothing really to say, no science to back that up. So what we write about at livespa.com is proving ancient wisdom with modern science. That's what I write about 3 times a week, is how we can take ancient principles that are traditionally medical or spiritual or something that have been used for thousands of years or hundreds of years, and then find science. And if you put the two together, I'm going like, we should really look at that, because there's value in, if something's been done for 1,000 years and there's science to back it up, we should explore that. So, that's what I did with the whole idea of love. I was like, well, let's see if we can prove that the human body is loving by nature, and that's who we truly are. So then I dug in, and we find out when people are loving and giving and more kind, they produce more oxytocin, which is a hormone for longevity. When we give and love and care for others, your good microbes flourish and your bad bugs disappear. Your bad blood microbes flourish when you're under stress or next to a violent, social disruptive type person. We know that when you give, eudaimonically, it changes your genetic code epigenetically. We know that everything that you see and touch, and this is scary in this world today, everything you see and touch and feel, you become. So what we expose ourselves to, we now know that to be true. If you see something violent, your microbes are going to change that. They send a message to your brain, and then the whole brain sends these emergency messages to the body. When you give and love and care for others, your telomeres, which are the measure of longevity on your chromosomes, they lengthen or extend. So the studies just went on and on and on and on about the fact that, I don't know if we're actually love authentically, but I can tell you one thing for sure. When we give and we care and we love, and particularly when we do it without an expectation, everything changes. Everything that we've been able to measure changes in a positive way. So I think that when you're a young kid, you're hardwired to want the approval of mom and dad. But at some point, we have to go through a rite of passage to free ourselves from that need to be loved and that ability, that natural ability to actually be loved, or that need to get love. So the idea is that what we do in Ayurveda is we give them the ability to be more self-aware, and then teach them how to take action steps to free themselves from old patterns of behavior, as opposed to, allowing, this childlike unconscious nature of us. One study showed that you and I together thinking today, right now, that we are 95% of what we think and say and do are based on unconscious behaviors, impressions set up in the first 6 years of life.
Wow.
So I really believe what Ayurveda is about is how to become conscious. So you're not just like 95% of what you're thinking and doing every single day is based on something that happened when you were less than 6 years old. That's what's driving the show here. That's crazy. We can't live like that. Traditional cultures had rites of passage, where young men and women would have to go through these, kind of break through the apron strings of mom and dad and be free. Like the mama leopard would say, okay, I'm going north, you're going south. Maybe I'll see you, maybe I won't, but it's over. You're on your own. We don't do that anymore. We just replace mom and dad with shopping and different things. And that piece, I believe, is, the part of Ayurveda that's not really discussed very, very much. And it also has so much to do with relations that people have with their husband and their wife and their family. It's this crazy mind of ours that impacts our gut, takes out our good bugs, and creates all of our problems. So yeah, fix your digestion, but don't leave the crazy mind like no problem. That's when you dig in deep with people and with your patients, you have to open that door.
For sure. And do you ever see that people have digestive or hormonal issues due to disapproval of their parents or even past life related issues?
Well, there's good science behind that. There's studies that show that impressions, traumatic impressions, emotional impressions can actually be carried on in the gene pool for 3 generations. So this idea of vasanas and some scars that we carry on, at least genetically, from our ancestors are very, very real. It's a well-documented thing. And, absolutely our upbringing, we create a personality to be safe and secure as a young kid. That's the major theme. And as parents, we have 6 kids, and our major goal with raising 6 kids was always to somehow make them feel safe enough that they were willing to open up the delicate part of them, the vulnerable part of them, to let something real out, but not just wall off, armor up, and then think about how can I make them like me? Can I wear more of this kind of makeup or be better at this or bigger at that or whatever? And teach them that it's really safe. And they've heard me say this for like 80 years now. And I feel like, they all know the drill and they do it. And I watch my kids slowly in this crazy world, letting something really real out. And in the process, transforming, who they were as young kids, trying to navigate this crazy world into who they truly are and meant to be in this world. And I feel like many people in this world, they never get there. They never get to, experiencing who they truly are. It's the difference between, objective or subjective referral. If you're objective referral, everything you're doing is based on what something outside of you is, how they're judging you, or you're doing everything for the objects around you. But subject referral is a thing called field independence, where you're independent of what's around you. You're just doing you. You're not doing them. There's a great story, a golfing story of a golfer who's named Ben Hogan, and he was putting this ball to win the tournament, and it was like a really, really long putt. And as he was pulling back the putter, the train came by and blew its whistle, and it was like, and everybody was like, "Whoa!" Like, how could that happen? Because it's the most important putt of the whole tournament. And he hits the putt and sinks the putt. People are like going crazy. Oh my God, you won the tournament. Afterwards in the interview, they said, "Mr. Hogan, that was so amazing. What did you think when that train came by and blew its whistle?" And he said, "What train?" That's a perfect example of being completely field independent, completely doing your thing. There were hundreds of people watching him do that, but completely connected to what he's doing. And I use that, and maybe this will help people get a bigger sense of where we're going with this. But let's say somebody hurts your feelings, right? We've all had hurt feelings. Someone throws an emotional dart at you and they hurt you. And you have three reactions to that. One, you can throw a dart back at them because they hurt you. You should hurt them, right? That's sort of like what we have in the world today, like hit harder, that guy. Then we have the other option, which is to run away or walk away or abandon them, right? Which is like, okay, so if I throw a dart at somebody, that's probably going to, if they throw a dart at me and I throw a dart back, that's going to hurt them. If they throw a dart at me and I walk away, they're going to feel abandoned by me. And the other third option is to, instead of, and both of those are you doing them. You're reacting, your behavior is based on what they did, completely based on them, not you. Mm-hmm. The third opportunity to act there is to say, through the window of heightened awareness, I am aware of the fact that that person, through the window of compassion and understanding, actually is hurt. And they have hurt feelings. And the only reason they would have thrown a dart at me was because they were hurt. And they were armored up for years and years and years. One study showed, this is actually not a study. This is something that I made up. But you can imagine that 3 or more million years ago, roses didn't have thorns. And they were edible. So every rhinoceros, everybody ate, and the elephants, they just stuck them up like crazy. One day, one rose said, you know what, I have an idea. What if we grow some thorns? And they're like, what? Thorns? You can't do that. That's crazy. We're roses. And they go, yeah, but we can stick the rose under the leaf. It's going to be great. And then when they bite us, they'll think twice. When they trample us, they'll think twice. So they took a vote and they decided on thorns. Obviously, we know that today to be true. So they have all these thorns now, which are their sort of their protection. So when you trample someone in their life long enough, hurt them long enough, they're going to protect and armor up, but eventually they're going to grow some thorns. Yes. And maybe one of those thorns might fly out and they hit you as part of their protection. And through the window of compassion and understanding, you can then say, oh, they're hurt. Mm-hmm. If I throw a dart at an already hurt person, expect another dart. If I abandon someone who's hurt and in need, they're going to say, see, I knew that person was no good and glad I threw the dart at them. But that's all doing them. That's all objective referral. Mm-hmm. If you do you through the window of compassion, understanding, and realize that they're hurt, and you interact with them through the window of compassion, it changes everything. Mm-hmm. And you don't do it because I want them to change. You do it because you're truly compassionate about that and understand their situation. Your mom may be a bad person. She's yelling, screaming. She wants you to call her every 3 days or 2 days or twice a day or whatever. We all have relationships in our lives that weren't great. And we can, if we blame them and judge them and push them out of our lives because they're crazy, as opposed to realizing that they were hurt and they endured who knows what. And maybe we do know what when they were young. And this is what they're projecting on the screen to do what? To want to be loved. See, we are all carrying the childlike need to get love. Mm-hmm. To be loved by someone else. Mm-hmm. That's the hardwire of needing approval that if we didn't have, we would have wandered into the jungles millions of years ago, got eaten by lions, and there'd be no people here today. Mm-hmm. So our need for being loved by someone else and approved of and appreciated is real, hardwired into us, but it's not who we are. It's what we had to be as young children, right? To feel safe and secure. But at some point, we have to break through that need to be loved and eventually just be loved. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're talking about, is realizing through awareness is like, oh, that's why that person threw a dart at me. That's why that person is mean to me. And through true compassion, you act. And that is that eudaimonic piece where they feel that impacts them at a genetic level. It makes them feel completely safe, maybe safe enough to open the petals of their flower and let something more beautiful, more powerful, more vulnerable out. And that, to me, is how we change the world, actually. We change it one random act of kindness at a time from a deep place of compassion and understanding, as opposed to giving something to someone, hoping that it appeases them or whatever. So inauthentic.
So true. And I just love that analogy, all of your analogies. I feel like I could just talk to you forever about this subject. We interrupt this episode with a 60-second break so I can tell you about an amazing product. So we've all been constipated before, a lot of Vatas listening, and we all know how horrible it feels to feel bloated and sluggish and just not like your healthiest and happiest self. And in fact, the average person holds about 10 to 15 pounds of toxins in their colon, which leads to a whole host of issues later on in life. So it's really important that we naturally detoxify these toxins, which Ayurveda recommends doing every season. So I highly recommend using an all-natural tea. I really like Teami blends. You can head over to Teami, Teami blends.com and use coupon code Sahara for 25% off any orders above $49.99. They have a great 30-day detox program, again, all natural products, and it can really help your digestion, especially if you're feeling a little Vata imbalanced. Now, let's get back to this episode. I want to talk a little bit about these thorns that you're speaking of. And it seems like the world is ruled by people with these thorns, that we're dealing with a global pitta imbalance. So can you speak about what's going on a planetary level and what we can do about it as individuals?
Well, I think that you're right. It's a very, very pitta. And the idea is that, if somebody does something mean to somebody else in a global way, we feel like we have to fight back, as opposed to ever asking, like this whole thing with North Korea. If you really read the history, after the Korean War, we bombed the entire country and there was nothing left to bomb. We bombed the dams. So after all the buildings were bombed, we bombed all their dams. We bombed everything. There was nothing left. So, and the war wasn't even over. It was just like, we're leaving, we're going to annihilate everything. And they rebuilt themselves. So, why can't we ask the question? Obviously, this guy is scared to death. Their country is scared to death because they think we're going to attack them. But at least from the citizens of this country, I don't think any American wants to just blow them up. Although we already did that, but nobody knows that. Mm-hmm. So nobody carries that history. So why don't we just, so if we really look at the truth and look at what America has done, which hasn't always been wonderful, and say, I'm sorry, or I understand where you're coming from, but truly I want you to know that I feel for you. And the reason we started the whole crazy thing in the first, because we were afraid they were communists. And nowadays we don't care if they're communists. We just want them not to bomb us, And so now this is this whole paranoia thing that's taking place. And it happens in, I just think we see it in everybody's individual life. When we blame the other person for why I don't like them. My mom is this way, so I push her out of my life. My brother, my sister, my uncle, my relatives, I push them out of my life because I don't like the way they are. So they're the problem. And when that happens, we give them the power to make you into something that you're not. America is a country of giving and loving and caring and being so good around the world. But when we interact at this level, we're giving other countries the power to make us into something that we're not. And then we become perceived as something that we're not. And that's exactly what's happening around the world. I had a patient of mine, I'll tell you a quick story. She came to me and she had a husband who smoked pot every day for the last 10 years. And she said, my husband doesn't really have a job and he smokes pot and the house is a disaster. The fields aren't mowed. The fences are in disrepair. The sprinkler doesn't work. I drive home every night and I go home and I just, I want to scream and yell because everything is just so crazy. And I said, do you love this guy? And she said, yeah, I do. And I said, okay, well, I would love to know what it is about this guy you love. Can you go home tonight as a homework assignment and write down a list of all the things you love about him? I know there's a million things that you're not loving about him right now, but let's just write about the stuff that you love. I said, but when you write that list, make a list, but ask yourself, how does it make you feel to write down all those things that you love about him? She went home that night, came back the next day. And I said, how did it feel? She said, it was really hard because I had so much resentment for this guy. And when I finally, got to the place where I felt the things that I really loved about him, I have to admit that I felt good. I felt warm and fuzzy and I felt loved and appreciated in some way. It was weird. And I said, okay, so for the last 10 years, you've been yelling and screaming at him to get a job and get a life and stop smoking pot and clean the yard and all that. And he hasn't done any of that. And then you take this letter, you write about all the stuff that you love about him, and all of a sudden you're feeling all warm and fuzzy. And she had said that I've become this crazy version of myself. I can't stand myself. And I said, so for the last 10 years, you've been doing what you think you needed to do to get him to change, and he never changed. But the truth is that just by writing the stuff that you love about him, you felt loved, you felt great. So your happiness didn't depend on him changing. Your happiness was right there all the time. So I said, here are all the things that you wrote about that make you feel loving and giving and kind. So why don't we use them as transformational action steps, as a template of the truth of the relationship was really fundamentally still there. It's based on truth. You love this guy. And when you act on that love, you feel great. So your homework is to go home and start acting on these things and forget about all the things you can't stand about them. Forget about the trash on the road and the driveway and all the disrepair. And just drive home and love that guy based on how you truly do, because you proved it that that's what made you feel great. And 10 years of trying to get him to change made you feel worse, and he didn't change. Nothing happened. It's a true story. She came back in my office 4 days later, and she said, walked in and she said, John, it's what? Because it's a miracle. I said, what happened? Because I drove home last night. The fields were plowed. The sprinklers were working. Dog pen, clean. I hadn't seen my house look that clean in 10 years. And I said, how did you feel in these last 4 or 5 days doing that? She goes, it felt so good not to yell and scream. And I said, how do you think he felt? And she goes, I don't know, but he cleaned the yard. And I said, I think he felt safe enough to because he wasn't being yelled at and criticized. He felt safe enough to let the petals of his flower open and let his true self out. And now that true self is out, you are having a relationship based on truth. It's a communion. And he has kids, 4 kids. So when he's now interacting based on that self, they feel him. Mm-hmm. They feel safe enough in his sunlight to be safe enough to maybe open up the petals of their flower and be who they truly are in the world. And that is how I think we change the global world, is by one heart at a time, taking a risk to be vulnerable and delicate and kind and loving and giving without an expectation to get something in return, or them to be the way you think they have to be or should be. So then therefore you feel safe enough to be okay. And that's, what religions have become. Religions have become clubs where people go into their religious group and they stay in these groups, and anybody outside their group isn't really cool. And now we're seeing the worst possible, expression of that in this world today. It happened, even all the Christians did the same. They broke up into many little groups, and there were a lot of arguments way back when no one liked the Lutherans, didn't like the Methodists, and and all that. And the Catholics were still not really part of the whole Christian thing. It's like crazy, but now we're seeing it in a global way because we judge other people, and I don't believe that's our deal. That's not who we are meant to be the judgers of others. I think that's a higher power is involved there. So I really believe that that's what Ayurveda why it's so valuable and powerful now in this day, in this culture, because we're so stressed out. We're so addicted to our senses and the outside world and getting reward chemistry hormones to be safe and secure and satisfied, that if we don't get that, we muster up all types of emotions and behaviors to get a reward that is temporary and fleeting. And then we find ourselves looking for something else. And if we don't get that something else, we're eventually can judge that thing. And a lot of times that's people and family and communities and countries. And, it's just not a good situation when we don't follow the rules that are pretty well known. When you look at the science, it's like hard to ignore the fact that when you do the loving stuff, really amazing things happen to you physiologically. Mm-hmm. When you're stressed out and aggressive, really bad things happen to your physiology. And I'm, concerned because the world we live in today is so violent, that is so available 24/7, that what's happening to our microbiome when it's exposed to that kind of constant 24/7 exposure.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And what you write about a lot are digestive issues. So I would love for you to speak about how our digestion is connected with this and steps that we can take to foster this healthy microbiome.
Well, we know that the stress impacts your gut, right? 95% of the serotonin is in your gut. So when the intestinal skin is like the 3 little bears, it can't be too dry, can't be too wet, it's got to be just right. And if it isn't just right, you have an alteration of the microbiology. When that happens, the intestinal skin begins to break down. And when the intestinal skin breaks down, you have a vulnerability of toxins and undigested proteins and microbes, mutated ones, going through the intestinal wall into the lymph and affecting even our genetic code and creating a host of lymphatic congestive issues. And then toxins will eventually default back to the liver, because that's where all the toxins from your intestinal tract tend to go if things aren't quite right. And the liver becomes toxic, the bile becomes thick, and now you lose digestive strength because your bile is the buffer for the acid in your stomach. So most people, because of processed foods and pesticides on our foods, have lost liver function and bile flow. That's the Ranjikapita. And when that becomes compromised, you can't make acid anymore. Your stomach, your Pachakapita, your stomach will not make the acid if it doesn't have an available amount of buffer or neutralizers in the form of bile. So what happens is your stomach starts to not digest the food the way it should. So I wrote a book called Eat Wheat, which is all about understanding that wheat is not the issue. I get it. People eat wheat, they feel bad. It's the processed nature of the wheat. That's the concern. Whole wheat has a low glycemic index, lowers the risk of diabetes in study after study after study, lowers risk of Alzheimer's in one study by 53%, another study by 54%. The issue with wheat is that if it's highly processed, it has cooked vegetable oils as preservatives that let wheat stay on the shelf squishy for a month. That's not how bread was 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, those cooked oils congest your liver and your gallbladder. Number one abdominal surgery today in America, gallbladder surgery. So what happens is people are having congestive gallbladder issues, no bile to break down the bad fats, the toxic fats, the mercury on every organic vegetable from the columbine plumes, no bile to buffer the acid from your stomach, which is required to cook hard to digest proteins like gluten and dairy and other hard to digest grains you probably see in your practice. People are not only gluten intolerant, they're grain intolerant, they're seed intolerant, they're nut intolerant. This is really scary because those grains and the nuts and the seeds have anti-nutrients on them that have been eaten for millions of years. This is not a 10,000-year-old thing.
Mm.
They have been eating, they found gluten in the teeth of ancient humans 3.5 million years ago. So it's not accurate to say we only have 10,000 years of genetics to eat wheat. That is simply not true. The Paleolithic people, 40,000 years ago, up to 10,000 years ago, they found sickles where they would cut the wheat. They found wheat berries in their caves. Mm. They found bowls where they ground it into mush. I mean, there's no question that they ate grasses. 2 million years ago, we acquired a gene to make amylase, an enzyme for starch. Mm-hmm. 2 million years ago, why would we acquire a gene for making an enzyme for starch, amylase, which is specific for wheat, by the way? A deficiency in amylase is linked to baker's asthma when they're around too much wheat flour. So it doesn't make any sense to say that wheat is some poison. But what we do know now is the science shows that on wheat, there are anti-nutrients in nuts and seeds and beans as well. And those anti-nutrients are immune stimulators. They scrub, scratch, irritate your intestinal tract to create an immune response to that. And for millions of years, that was the robust driver of our immune system. Now with processed foods, we don't have that. We have a $16 billion a year gluten-free industry, which is giving us highly processed wheat alternatives, which are more of the same thing that got us in this mess in the first place. And the studies show that people who eat wheat have 4 times less mercury in their blood than people who are gluten-free. People who eat wheat have more good bugs and less bad bugs than people who are gluten-free. And in another study, people who eat wheat have significantly more killer T cells, a measure of immunity, than people who are gluten-free. All of which suggesting that, and 2 big Harvard studies came out recently showing that people who were gluten-free had significantly more heart disease and more diabetes. 2 different studies, both 30 years, both over 100,000 people, that both had people who were gluten-free, who didn't have to be, they weren't celiac, had significantly more heart disease and diabetes than people who were eating wheat. All of which suggests that here we go again, right? We took cholesterol out of our diet, 60 years ago. They replaced it with these highly processed vegetable oils, which are a disaster. Now we're doing the same thing, giving us more processed foods, taking whole wheat out of our diet because we think it's a poison. If you want to watch I did a debate with Dr. David Perlmutter, author of The Brain Drain. It's on my website. You can watch that debate. It's a great debate where, his brain drain, research and my Eat Wheat book, we did kind of a battle of those 2 books. But at the end of the day, David said, you know what? John's right. It's really about digestion. People can't digest the wheat. I choose to take the wheat out of the diet, but what John chooses to do is actually fix the digestion. I'm going Well, yeah, because your digestion is your immunity. It is your detoxification system. And if you don't fix that, we're just going to keep taking stuff out of our diet more and more and more. And that's exactly what we see happening.
Yes.
When I first got into practice in 1984, it was like, yeah, there were some wheat intolerances to people. There were food intolerances, but no one had intolerance to rice, to grains, to beans. I mean, that was just unheard of. And now it's almost all my patients can't digest. I mean, I do specialize in digestion, so I get that. But I have so many people who can't digest anything.
Yes.
It's just really, really crazy. So I give people a step-by-step guide to troubleshoot what part of the digestion is broken down and how to fix it with herbs and whole foods and how to bring it back into balance. Simple things like beets, which are a cholagogue to flush your bile, apples, beets, and celery juice in the morning. We have a formula called Beet Cleanse. We have another formula called Gentle Digest, which has 5 spices: ginger, cumin, coriander, fennel, and cardamom. When you put all those spices together, they act synergistically to turn on your stomach acid, to increase your bile flow, to increase your production of duodenal and pancreatic enzymes, to get you to be the digester so we can get you on an herbal supplement, get you better, and get you off. And at Life Spa, that's what I do, is I try to help folks get on, get better, get off. No dependencies, no dependence on probiotics, on pills or powders, to get function back. And then, of course, making sure that they do that by eating in a seasonal way, in a way that locks us back into our circadian rhythms. The Nobel Prize was won just a couple of weeks ago on circadian medicine. That's Ayurveda 101. You know that, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I've got at least 30 articles written on circadian medicine with all the science to back it up. It's just really profound how modern science is proving what Ayurveda's talked about for so many years: when to eat, how to eat, what to eat seasonally. There was one, we actually published a grocery list and a recipe list and a superfood list for every month of the year for free. Anybody can get it. It's called the 3-Season Diet Challenge. And because and I wrote a book called The 3-Season Diet, but nobody read it. Not enough people read it anyway to make a dent in the culture. And so I wanted to just put that information out for everybody. So anybody can get a grocery list, recipes, and a superfood list for every month of the year. And I did that based on a study that I read that blew my mind. There was a study on deer, and they found that deer eat bark in the winter, and they have different microbes for bark in the winter. And they eat leaves in the summer, and they have different microbes for digesting leaves in the summer. But if the deer were to eat bark in the summer with the wrong microbes, it would cause such a level of indigestion, it could actually kill the deer. And I was like, wait a minute, deer die when they eat out of season? And that just blew my mind. What about us? Humans, we eat the same stuff every day, every year, nothing changes. So that's when I just really dug into the circadian medicine and put together this whole 3-Season Diet Challenge, which is challenging people to eat seasonally. We put it for free every month. You get a brand new packet. We have all the flowers that are harvested every month in the summer and what they do and how the edible ones, of course, and everything we know about their benefits and things like that. It's just powerful, powerful medicine. But that's, again, how we bring that heightened awareness back into balance by creating a lifestyle in rhythm with nature. Like when you're going downstream with the current in your boat. I don't know if you've ever done that, but it's so peaceful. Mm-hmm. As soon as you turn the boat around and start paddling upstream, I don't know if anybody ever done that, but if you do it, it's super loud. The waves are slapping your canoe, you're paddling like crazy. You turn it around, you go downstream, you don't hear anything. It's like completely silent. And that's the difference between having your life going with the flow and going against it. When you're with the flow, it's silent. You can become aware. You're finishing your day with the same energy as you started. You're not finishing exhausted, beat up, stressed out, rebuilding yourself on the weekends. This is not the way that we should be going through life. Life is not and never shouldn't be a struggle.
Yeah. So I have 2 questions with that. One is, what if your Vikriti is different? Let's say you're still very Vata and it's summer. Should you still follow a more cooling diet or should you stick with your Vikriti?
I believe that the best thing to do for all of us is to eat seasonally. And that is an Ayurvedic concept. The idea that we should eat foods for our Vikriti is a medicinal tweak to bring the body back into balance with special, specific, eat more of this or eat less of these extreme, aggravating foods. But fundamentally, Ayurveda was eat connected to the season. Overlay that on top of your body type. If you're a Pitta body type, then the season you have to eat really cooling foods would be summer, winter, vata. If you have a vata imbalance, you could say, okay, I've got this really bad Vikriti. We have 3 grocery lists, winter, summer, and spring. You can get them for free. And you can say, okay, it's summertime. Well, right now, what is it? Winter. So let's say I'm on winter, but I have a really strong pitta imbalance. Take the foods on the winter list and the foods on the summer list. Circle the foods that are on both of those lists because there's primary and secondary foods on both of those lists. Any food that's on both the summer and the winter lists will be a food that'll be really good for your vata constitution and for your pitta imbalance. And that's the way you can sort of quickly hedge your bet and find out which foods would be actually seasonal for you to stay connected to the rhythms of nature, because circadian rhythms is Nobel Prize winning science now, not to be messed with. You want to get in rhythm with nature. The bugs in the soil attached to the plants you eat, change your microbiome to dissipate heat in the summer, boost immunity in the winter, and decongest you in the spring. So if you're not getting that, you're chasing the tail. You know what I mean? You're not treating the cause. Okay. So by doing what I just said, combining if you're a vata imbalance and you're in the summer, take the summer list and the vata list, put them together. Whatever foods are on both those lists, those are your superfoods for that season. And then you can balance. And then when you get your body completely in rhythm and your balance is back, you go back to seasonal eating. Overlay your constitutional body type, which is if you're more vata, then I have to really be on the straight and narrow in the winter. Really, really follow it. If I'm, mostly pitta, I still want to eat seasonally in the winter, but it's not going to make or break me if I don't. Make sense?
Totally. And what if you live in a place that the seasonal changes aren't that drastic, like here in Los Angeles or in Florida? Should you still shift your diet?
Well, I went to school in LA, so I know LA pretty well. And I came from the East Coast in Colorado, so it was always weird to me that everybody in December is walking around with down coats. I don't even why they even sell down coats in LA, but they do. Maybe with global warming that's changed. But the thing is that it is quite cold in LA in the wintertime. It's very damp and it's a very damp cold. And there are growing seasons in LA and there are growing seasons in Florida. In Florida, it could be 95 degrees in the summer and 65 degrees in the winter. That's a 30-degree difference. It's a huge difference. So, and in those cultures, like in the West Coast and South, people are less likely to go from a 72-degree air-conditioned house to a 72-degree temperature-controlled car to a house office. And we never leave 72 degrees. We don't experience the dramatic shift, which screws our circadian rhythms, by the way. Our bugs are like, it's cold. That's right. Supposed to deal with amp up the thyroid, get more metabolism, things like that. We don't really have that. But when you live in LA and Florida, people there are way more connected to those temperature shifts because they're not, isolating themselves from the changes of nature as much. But even in those places, there are growing seasons and they're very, very real. Avocados would be the winter food in Florida, where here we have to eat, wheat, which is a very heavy, rich, slimy grain, or nuts or seeds, which grow in the north. Where in the South you get avocados and coconuts, but they're still high fat insulators.
Right. And so with the wheat, do you also recommend that for someone with a kapha constitution? Because I know traditional Ayurveda is more like low fat, low carb. What would you recommend for a kapha person?
Well, again, I was giving a lecture once with an Ayurvedic conference, and it was a long time ago, one of the Ayurvedic doctors came to the States and he said, I'm really impressed and intrigued by how everyone here in America has taken the diets and shifted them to be constitutional for the vata, pitta, kapha, that a family would have to then serve vata food for one kid and pitta food for another kid. And I was like, that's because it's wrong. That's because we screwed up. That's because in America, we wanted to create sidebars and magazine articles that say, here's the body type questionnaire, and here's what you should do, because here's your identity, and here's your individual thing. It was a marketing ploy. Never in the history of Ayurveda was the body types and the diets connected. It was seasonal. Now, you always recognize your body type, who you are, and you would make adjustments to that, but everybody ate the same food. I mean, think about it. If you're in Vermont in January in the year 1901, where are you going to get, and you're a pitta body type, where are you going to get a pitta pacifying diet? Where?
Right.
So wouldn't Ayurveda, of all the medicinal systems in the world, be at least one system that you can just plug in, you drop in anywhere on the planet, anytime, and plug in Ayurveda, right? How are you going to plug in a pitta pacifying diet in Vermont in January in the year 1901?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I know what they ate then. They shot deer and I don't know, dug up some roots if they had any left over, the wheat that was, no, they didn't have a pitta pacifying diet for those people. So it was just interesting to hear another Ayurvedic. Then I dug into that and I spoke to many Ayurvedic doctors to confirm that. I'm going, yeah, that makes zero sense that we do that. But it's still a thing where people say, I'm a Vata type, I'm a Pitta type, I'm a Kapha type. Should I eat? What should I eat? I go, well, first of all, is your digestive system in balance? Okay. Clearly, a Kapha type in a Kapha season eating a Kapha grain like wheat would be a bad idea. But wheat isn't harvested in the spring. So if you were living off the land, you would never see wheat. You would never see a Kapha congesting, mucus brewing, boosting grain in the spring. In fact, corn, which is now a fall harvested grain, was originally harvested in the spring before the monsoons, and it's a very dry grain, which is why corn is a Kapha balancing grain. It's a dry grain, and it was originally harvested. That's what I wrote about in my book, The 3-Season Diet. I went to all the foods and found, okay, where did you really come from? And when were what season did you really grow in? And what was your message for the planet? Because the foods are helping to sort of antidote the extreme of the season. The nuts and the seeds antidote the cold and dry of winter. The fruits and vegetables antidote the heat of summer. And the berries and the cherries and the root vegetables of spring help to antidote the mucus-making allergy tendencies for spring. So the foods are the antidote. So I was so intrigued by, okay, what are these foods trying to do for us? As opposed to just sort of like everybody just make a list for your body type. It's more interesting than that. That's so simple. It's nature providing an antidote to the extreme of that season where it grew up. Now, of course, there's been hybridization that's taken place, which makes things wonky, right? Because you've got berries that are harvested at any time of the year now when they never were. They were spring and summer, and now they're not. So it's trickier, but that's what I try to do with Eat Wheat, or with Eat Wheat as well, but with the 3-Season Diet, is try to help people navigate around the hybridization, but also understand where these foods really came from and what their message, their medicinal message was for us. And wheat was, it's a fall harvested grain, as are most grains. And guess what? Amylase, the enzyme for wheat and starch and nuts and seeds and other grains, increases in your body and mind in the fall and the winter. And it decreases in the spring and the summer, part of our circadian rhythms, something that most people don't really know. I mean, who knows that, right?
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Right. So we're part of those rhythms, and that was there for millions of years. We got amylase. When did we get it? When we needed it, when those grains were harvested. Springtime was the famine. All your grains and root stores were gone. By spring, you're waiting for stuff to come out of the ground. It's harsh in the spring, and it's famine time. We reset fat burning. We stabilize our blood sugar. We lose all the weight from all the hoarding and storing of fat and protein. We actually go even sort of diabetic in the fall, eating all the fruits and all the vegetables and all the grains, all this sugar to store extra fat and store energy reserves so we can make it through the winter and then burn it all off in the spring. We were extremely cyclical beings, part of these rhythms, but now we sort of homogenize everything into this sort of kind of uni season where the whole annual cycle has been morphed into something that isn't really as dramatic. But now we're seeing, the science is saying that big study and article in Scientific America said that circadian medicine will revolutionize medicine as we know it. Simply put, getting back to the rhythms. And that's what I write a ton about in Eat Wheat, and I've read a ton about in the 3-Season Diet. But also that's the main theme of the 3-Season Diet Challenge, where you get all that information for free.
Perfect. Well, I'll check that out. And the last question that I want to ask you about that I've gotten so many requests on is Candida and your view on it. It's something that so many people suffer from, and I'd love to hear your opinion.
Well, again, Candida is an opportunistic bacteria. It's there naturally, but it opportunistically takes hold when things go awry. When you don't have enough bile, for example, and the stomach is not making enough acid, you're going to let all types of microbes enter, parasites enter. You're not going to have the environment to create an environment that allows the health of your intestinal skin to protect you. The study done on longevity, and it found that there were 3 pieces to the longevity puzzle. One was the health and integrity of your intestinal skin. Number two was the health integrity of the lymphatic system that's on the outside of the intestinal skin, your rasa dhatu, which has just been coined or labeled the 79th organ of the body. That is now an organ. All the lymph, the mesentery between your intestinal tract is now its own organ. So, so important. Still beginning to be understood, the value of the lymph. And I've written tons about rasa dhatu. Why is it the first dhatu? Because it's so critically important. It's the study of longevity, rasayana, and we gloss over it in Western medicine. Nobody knows about it. So the three things were the health integrity of the lymph on the outside of the gut wall, the intestinal skin, and the bugs that depend on the lymph drainage off the intestinal skin and your intestinal skin. So it's those three, the bugs, the skin, and the lymph. Those are the three that are linked to our longevity. And when they're not quite right, you will have opportunistic candida taking hold. So what I do is I amp up digestion with digestive supporting herbs, depending on the individual. Oftentimes I will, if their gut is really, really irritated, we have a product called the slippery elm prebiotic, which is a combination of slippery elm, marshmallow root, and licorice root. And we boil the chops roots from 2 quarts to a half a quart in a very thick, viscous tea. And you take tablespoon dosages throughout the day, like the Pepto-Bismol commercial, coating your whole intestinal tract. Then I give you a probiotic, one that has Saccharomyces. Half of it's got Saccharomyces to kill the candida. The other half are colonizing probiotics, which are ones that stick to your intestinal wall and create new permanent residents. In fact, there's really good science behind that. So you knock out the bad guys, repopulate with permanent residents, reset function with whatever else might be their individual need, and then you don't have to take probiotics for the rest of your life. I don't take probiotics. I use them to reset. But the idea that we're going to take probiotics every day for the rest of our life is sort of crazy, right? I mean, it's just the new fad, but it doesn't make any sense because I used probiotics and digestive enzymes when I got out of school in 1984. And I quickly realized that people got better, but as soon as you tried to get them off of it, everything went right back to where it was. Get them off of wheat, they feel better. Get them off of dairy, they feel better. But then as soon as you take them, put them back on, they can't digest it. So clearly to me, that was never the solution, was to take stuff out of the diet or give them an enzyme or hydrochloric acid or, give them a probiotic. We had probiotics in 1984 and now they're become really popular. But the same rules apply. Unless you're using colonizers, you're not going to create permanent residence. You're not going to create self-sufficiency. You're just going to create a dependency, which we don't need. People don't want that. I wouldn't want that. I couldn't treat my patients in a way that I didn't want to be. I didn't want to be stuck on a pill or a powder or an enzyme for the rest of my life. So these are really interesting things that I write a ton about that people can learn more about if they want, how to reboot digestion. But candida is very, very easy to fix. Very easy. You don't have to be on a life sentence of no fruit for the rest of your life if you had candida. That's sort of nuts, right? But there's a time and place for creating a clean diet while you do the repair, and then you go back to seasonal eating.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this super important information with all of us. And how can we learn more from you, participate in your programs, and visit you?
Yeah, well, my website is lifespa.com, lifespa.com. And there you can sign up for my newsletter, which just comes 3 times a week. And there's over 1,000 videos and newsletters online where you can get all kinds of self-help information. And of course, we have tons of free ebooks, one ebook on the lymphatic system. If you're interested in that, it's got over 100 scientific references in that ebook showing all the science that's literally buried in the journals that may never see medical practice. And that's what I've tried to do, is bring that out and say, guys, we got to look at this. And I've got tons of articles on the lymphatic system, how to support your lymphatic system, and all the things that you will feel when your lymphatic system is wonky. And a lot of people don't realize that their problem, hormonal problem, menstrual problem, may actually be a lymphatic issue more than a hormonal issue. So there's a lot there for particularly women to learn about in terms of how to bring their bodies back into balance without jumping the gun and going into hormone replacement. But you can sign up for that. That's all for free at lifespa.com. And of course, the 3-season diet challenge is for free too. So check that out as well. We get your free grocery lists and recipes and superfood lists for every month. You got to do that. You got to start getting connected to those rhythms. That's the key. That's really the key to that silence and that awareness. So we can then, like animals, they do that naturally. And how aware are they? So tuned in when to migrate, when not to migrate, what to do when a fire comes. And they're so tuned in. And that's because they're living off the land. And guess what the land has? Bugs. And guess what the bugs are totally connected to the earth rhythms, the light dark cycles. And we eat them. That gets us connected. Eat processed food, it's like nothing. We're completely separate. Dangerous road to hoe.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that important information with us. And I just want to acknowledge you for all of the work that you've done for really getting to the root of the problem that so many people, it's so much easier to say, don't eat this, don't eat that, and create a longer list of foods to never eat again. So thank you so much for diving in there, going places that no other person wants to go, saying maybe what's less trendy right now, but something that's age old that we all really need to hear. And I know this is really going to change the lives of so many people.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and see you next time. Namaste. I hope you feel educated, inspired, and more motivated than ever to follow the Ayurvedic nutrition practices and allow your digestion to flourish more than ever before. Thank you, Dr. John Douillard, for sharing your wisdom with us. And if you're interested in learning more about Ayurvedic nutrition, I highly recommend getting my new book, Eat, Feel Fresh, a plant-based organic Ayurvedic cookbook that focuses on alkaline Ayurveda, how we can eat in Ayurvedic guidelines for today's world, how we can focus on the leafy greens and the fruits and lessen the acidic dairy products and rice-heavy products that Ayurveda was traditionally higher in, because in ancient India, they were farmers and they were very active and they lived very different lifestyles from us today. So I look at Ayurveda from today's lens and make it easy, affordable, and delicious for you to start integrating these incredible practices that you learned in this episode into your life. So head over to Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, wherever you order your books, pre-order Eat, Feel Fresh, keep your receipt, put it on my website, iamsahararose.com, where it says pre-order Eat, Feel Fresh. You will be able to submit your recipe, so I'll be able to send you your pre-order bonuses. I am so honored to have you here. And if you loved this episode, I would love to offer you a free gift. And that is the first half of my unreleased book, Eat Right for Your Mind Body Type, which is different from my book, Eat, Feel Fresh, the plant-based Ayurvedic cookbook. But to get Eat Right for Your Mind Body Type, all you got to do is leave a review for me in the iTunes store, take a screenshot before you hit submit, and send it to me on email to sahara@eatfeelfresh.com, and I will send you back the first half of my unreleased book, Eat Right for Your Mind Body Type. Namaste.
Thank you.